All right, welcome to the first in our New Ulm Film Society series on musicals. We're going to be exploring the history of the musical in Hollywood, and we're going to go in chronological order, and we're going to start with the 30s and move our way all the way up to 2010, modern era. And so we have to start with 1933's 42nd Street. Now, this is not the first musical that was ever made, but it was the musical that pretty much made musicals popular and box office, profit. You could do it. See, the truth is about musicals, they technically are basically as old as the talkie. Obviously, when movies first started out, didn't really have musicals during the silent film era. It's kind of hard to do that. But the minute we got talkies, we were able to synchronize sound with it. You got your musical. The first talkie was The Jazz Singer, which shockingly included jazz music and jazz singing, which makes sense. But the thing is, early on, it wasn't a huge profit to get a musical early on. Those first few years, you didn't see a lot of profitable ones. They were trying to make musicals from the beginning, but they just didn't really catch off as well as big profit. Part of the problem was, there was kind of two problems really with the musical in the early days. One, you didn't really have... people knew about musicals from the stage. They'd see vaudeville acts, stuff like that, so that already existed. And so people knew what a musical was. It wasn't that big a deal. But the thing is, putting that on film, translating that to film didn't always necessarily work. You had the camera problem. Where do you put the camera so you could see everybody? It just didn't work. It wasn't looking as good. And then you had other problems of just moving it around, because that's, with the musical, it was all kind of staged to that one Presidium, that one location. But when you had the camera work, it didn't look any better. It was like, why are we watching a movie when we could just see an actual musical in the theater? You couldn't bring that experience. There was no benefit to the movie version of a musical over the stage one. That was part of the problem. That kind of all changed when this movie came out here. And I'm not pausing that before it goes on too far here. But anyway, the movie 42nd Street is actually, it's based on a novel, actually. And the book that came out, same title and everything. And the book was written, the gentleman who wrote it actually wrote the book, which is big irony. He kind of wrote it as kind of a takedown, a Muckraker King novel of what happens to chorus girls and chorus lines. He wanted to show what happened behind the scenes of stuff. And see how we're treating these chorus girls? Isn't this terrible? And instead, it became this really, it's the opposite, like, oh, people were like, read it, like, oh, our chorus lines are so cool, look what happens. And he was like, no, that's not what I intended at all. And of course, it became a movie in 1933. And it was kind of a risk at the time. Warner Brothers was kind of desperate, though. Warner Brothers, who produced the film, they were almost going to go bankrupt. One of the many times Warner Brothers almost went bankrupt. This movie ultimately saved them. It made a lot of money. It was one of the most profitable movies of 1933, and it saved the entire studio, and it led to a series of other musicals that Warner Bros. Would create. One of the secrets that made this one better is, first off, probably the story, because it was based on a novel. They could adapt it somewhat and get a kind of a behind-the-scene thing, because one of the unique things about this movie, it's a musical about making musicals. The whole reason it's called 42nd Street, that was the theater street, that's the district from New York City, so people would have known that. They would have known where the musicals came from at the time, like, oh, okay, this is a story about putting on a musical. And that was kind of novel at the time. It's been repeated and reused, and we'll see it referenced again in other future films in our series too, where it's a classic musical trope, like, we're going to put on a show, let's put on a show, and then you have excuses for why the music's being incorporated in the first place. But the other secret to this movie that kind of made a success is the choreographer, Busby Berkeley. He's the big deal, and this was how he kind of this is what broke him out, this film. He is the choreographer for it, and the thing is, he had been doing choreography for musicals on stage before, but his work didn't really shine that well on the stage for one big reason. He had a tendency, how you can tell a Busby Berkeley number, is he liked to put a bunch of people on stage, a bunch of dancers, like dozens of dancers, and they would all be doing these really elaborate choreography with big circle geometric shapes, almost a kaleidoscope of images, all the props, they're all dressed in elaborate costumes, really big. It looks great. You can't put that on a normal musical stage for a theater. It doesn't work that well, because you can't fit all those people on one stage. And all the costumes there, you wouldn't even see most of it, because there's so many different angles and stuff, because you can only, with the theater, have audiences one perspective, you can only see one thing. So they're going to miss most of what's going on anyway, so it's kind of wasted movement. So his choreography didn't really work well for stage. But in film, you can cheat it. You can make it look better because you have a camera that moves, and he understood that. So you can move the camera to where it looks the best angle and keep moving the camera as need be. And it doesn't matter if the stage is too small. You can cheat it because it's all film. So you can show different segments of it and do an edit or cut here rather than be one big all-purpose number that's uncut. For a normal audience, you can just see the camera like move around to different parts of it, and you can put as many people you want on the stage. Doesn't matter because it's not a real stage. It's actually just a theater studio somewhere, and they can move around and move the props as they will. And if there's a problem, they can cut and just restart over again. So it works. His choreography benefited on theater, and now you have something finally that audiences can get at a movie theater that you can't get on stage. That's something they're never going to see before at all, and that helps out a lot. Now, one of the other things that's fascinating about this movie when it comes out, I kind of mentioned this already, this is a pre-Hays Code film. It came out in 1933. The Hays Code didn't really go into effect until 1934. Now, that was Hollywood's attempt to self-censor. You see, there was a lot of criticism, and they were worried that the government was going to come down and crack down and say, you can't just make all this, what you're doing on film, this is so immoral, some of the stuff you're showing, you can't do this. And they were afraid that, there was a real possibility the government would crack down. Yeah, they had the First Amendment, but still, it had happened before the government had gotten a little shaky about some of the stuff like that. So the studios, getting smart, basically hired a guy ahead of time. They're like, okay, we need to self-censor and put a code so that it looks like we're, being appropriate and everything's fine. They started working on the Hays Code about 1930, but it didn't really go into full effect until 1934. So this movie didn't have to worry about all those regulations that were in place. So yes, this film, a little bit more risque than it would have been if it came out 1 year later. So you have a lot of stuff in there that would be like, you wouldn't see in films again for decades, literally. One of the most obvious examples of this with this movie is this movie, when it was made, Prohibition was still in effect. So it's illegal to be having alcohol. They're drinking constantly in this film. You can show it in the film, that's okay, because it was pre-Hays Code. After that, no, you would never be allowed to do that. But then the Hays, Prohibition ended, and then that became legal. So it was only a problem for a little bit of time. But yeah, a lot of this other film would not have been able to be made even 1 year later. But it helped, and you got a lot of other fun little tidbits about how that worked. And the movie basically made stars out of a lot of musical people. This is how they kind of got started. Busby Berkeley, his choreography career continued on. Warner Brothers hired him to do 5 consecutive films for them. And he's still just shorthand for how you get really cool choreography to this day, actually. This is also an early film for Ginger Rogers, too. She's in this movie, too. Not one of the main characters, but she is one in there. And the movie's kind of an ensemble, too. That's the other interesting thing. There's no real main character necessarily. Technically, you could argue it's the director, but or the young ingenue that we get in the film. But it's just a bunch of series of things that can happen there, and it serves as a model for how you can really make a fun musical that a lot of people can see. And you'll probably notice a bunch of cliches and stuff like, wait, I've seen that in other movies before. That's popped up in this. Yeah, this is the movie that originated those cliches. This is where it comes from. It's kind of the source material for all musicals, which is why we have to start with it. So without further ado, we'll get into this, and we can talk about some of the other stuff once the movie starts here. I think I might have to backtrack because I'm not sure if it started without being here, but we'll get it going right now.